So Glenn Greenwald highlighted some terrifying numbers in, I believe it's the General Social Survey, and these numbers have been overlooked by everybody. Media is not talking about them, neither the political parties are talking about them, but they paint a devastating picture. For Americans between 18 and 24 years old, 25.5%, just over 1 out of every 4 young Americans, said they had, for the much larger group, oh, did I mess that up? I think that's supposed to say said they had considered suicide. For the much larger group of Americans, ages 25 to 44, the percentage was somewhat lower, but still extremely alarming, 16%. A total of 18.6% of Hispanic Americans and 15% of African Americans said they had seriously considered suicide in the past month. Yes, that's what it means. The two groups with the largest percentage who said yes, Americans with less than a high school degree and unpaid caregivers, both of whom have 30%, or almost 1 out of every 3 who answered in the affirmative. A full 10% of the U.S. population generally had contemplated suicide in the month of June. Let me repeat that. 10% of the entire U.S. population had seriously contemplated suicide in the month of June. 25.5% of people age 18 to 24. That's astonishing. He goes on to say, 40.9% of respondents reported at least one adverse mental or behavioral health condition, including symptoms of anxiety disorder or depressive disorder, 30.9%, symptoms of trauma and stress-related disorder related to the pandemic, 26%, and having started or increased substance use to cope with stress or emotions related to COVID-19, 13%. For the youngest part of the adult population, 18 to 24, significantly more than half, 62.9%, reported suffering from depressive or anxiety disorders. This is an epidemic, ladies and gentlemen. This is an absolute epidemic that we have in this country. These numbers are out of this world. Now, I mean, what accounts for this? That's a difficult conversation. I'm just an idiot on YouTube who babbles. I'm really not qualified to answer that. I mean, I could give you my guesses, but I just want to be clear up front that they're all guesses. Yes, there is a significant portion of this is related to the fact that human beings are social animals. We had to lock down the economy because of COVID, so people didn't get out as much. They weren't being social creatures as much as they would like to be. And that is going to tend to increase psychological and mental illness. It is, because human beings sort of need that social, cultural connection with other people, and when they're deprived of that, yes, you're going to start feeling a hell of a lot worse. So I do think that's one thing. I think a lot of this is just modern society as well. I do. When people don't have, most importantly, material well-being, you literally need that in order to survive. You need material well-being in order to survive. When people don't have that, when people don't have love and support, when people don't have a sense of purpose, this happens. So the solutions are multifaceted. Some of them have to be addressed at the community level, some of them more at the individual level. But yeah, we need to make sure that we should treat mental health in the same way we treat physical health. Although we have a terrible healthcare system, so maybe that's a bad example. But in the same way that we need a single-payer healthcare system for physical health, we also need mental health care to be as readily available and free. I definitely think that's true. I also think just the fact that our political system is so broken, and therefore people don't have the material well-being, I also think that has to be addressed in order for people to feel better, because people feel atomized and disconnected from everybody else, in part because society is structured to make you feel that way. You know, there is no stressing of community in certain ways. Whereas in other developed countries, yes, there is more of a sense of like, we're all in this together. You know, so many other countries, they have free healthcare, they have free education. This paying your taxes is viewed as like a patriotic duty to help uplift your neighbor. Paid vacation time by law. Like, we're really individualistic in this country in a way that other developed countries are just not. And I do think that's probably harming our psychological well-being. But the personal is political. So we need to organize and fight for a better life in order for people to start feeling better. But also on an individual level, I think that people really need to be able to forget the moment better. Because what's happening now, it's all too real. It's all too depressing. And I think that that is leading to a giant increase in depression and anxiety and all these negative thoughts. I could tell you guys for sure, the happiest I ever am is when I'm able to effectively tap into what's called the zone or a flow state. And when you're in that zone, when you're in that flow state, there's no consideration or concern for yourself, your individuality, your personhood, your ego. You're so tied up in the moment and you're so locked into the moment that everything flows. It flows in a very natural way. And when you're in that state, there are no worries, there are no concerns, there's just actions, and there's just what is. And it's a much more difficult conversation to say, how do we get to a flow state? How does any individual get to a flow state? But, step one would be becoming obsessed with something. Whether it's your job, whether it's a hobby, step one is you have to find something that you're willing to dedicate time and energy and effort into. And even sometimes you have to work to get to a place where you nurture a hobby enough to care about it. Sometimes you start a hobby, you don't like it, but if you keep doing it for a month and a half, after a month and a half, you're like, you know what, I actually really like doing this. It's where I unplug. It's where I zone out. I can say, speaking from my own experience, that's when I'm my happiest. When I get in the zone, when I get in the flow state, when I'm focused on something in a way that totally dissolves any concerns for individuality or independence or my personhood or my ego or my perception of how others are viewing me or whatever it might be, that's all gone when you're totally immersed in an activity and you're basically drowning yourself in something that takes away all of your negative emotions and thoughts and feels. Now, again, I get it. It's easier said than done, and some people who are experiencing severe anxiety or depression will respond with exactly that. They'll be like, that's so much easier said than done, and you don't even know what I'm going through. Correct. But what I do know is what you're doing now is not working. Because if it was, then you would feel okay, wouldn't you? And you don't feel okay. So, forgive me for making a Trumpian argument here, but what the hell do you have to lose? What the hell do you have to lose? If things are not going well, you got to make some changes. And it seems like actually, conceptually speaking, it's a pretty simple step to try to lose yourself in a couple activities. By the way, you could do it with one, you could do it with two or three. Whatever it might be, give it the time, give it the dedication, give yourself the ability to move forward in a way where eventually you can step into a flow state. So, listen, I'm not trying to do the typical far-right thing of like boil down these complex, nuanced societal, sociological issues into the individual, because I don't think that gives them justice. But what I am doing is saying that is a part of the puzzle here. That is definitely a part of the puzzle. People who are losing themselves in activities are not the people who are going to turn around and say, yeah, I seriously contemplated suicide and I'm massively depressed and I have severe anxiety. So it is a multifaceted problem and there are many things that need to be done. Okay? You absolutely need to give people material well-being. That would be effectively Social Security for all, a UBI check, another stimulus check. People need material well-being. We also need a single-payer healthcare system, but also mental healthcare system, because people need that professional support. They need, if somebody needs a therapist, somebody needs somebody to rely on, somebody needs maybe life-saving medication. There's no shame in that at all. If you hurt your leg, you need medicine, you take it, you don't think there's a moral angle to it. Why would there be a moral angle to taking something for your mental health? It's the same as if your leg gets hurt. So that's another big part of it. But more importantly, we need the community, we need the love and the togetherness. And then beyond that is the individual. And when you talk about the individual stuff, the best way to address individual issues is, ironically enough, by losing your sense of that individuality. Isn't that weird? Somebody can have all these personal, psychological, individual problems. The solution is the exact opposite of what one would think. The solution is, well, what if we erase that individuality that you have at the moment? What if we got rid of that? What if we tapped into a higher plane? Tapped into a different frequency that got your mind off of all that nonsense? You'd take that deal, wouldn't you? It's funny, but the solutions are oftentimes the simplest concepts. But we think we're the smartest idiots on the planet, aren't we? Because people have a tendency to rationalize until the cows come home. Let me just overthink everything a million times over. And you're only getting in your own way if you do that. You ain't going to find no answers. You're just a brilliant idiot. Your mind is moving at 1,000 miles an hour and you ain't going nowhere, son. So what do? Unplug. Unplug it. Find something to do. Tap into a flow state. And just let the problems wash away, even temporarily. So anyway, these are really astounding numbers, and this is a national scandal. And yet again, I'm going to say it again. How many times do I say this on this show? You have to come to a loudmouth idiot YouTuber like myself in order to get any serious conversation about the most important issues of the day. That's a terrible indictment on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the nightly news, all of society, the politicians. The fact that there's no serious heart-to-heart conversation going on. When it comes to serious issues like this, there's no alarm bells being rung over this. That tells you that perhaps there's even more work to be done at the societal level because our institutions are beyond broken.